the less a firm depends on you, the owner, the more valuable it is. Selling to private equity does not mean it's all sunshine and rainbows. There are lots of strings that come with those deals. You cannot lock lawyers down with non-competes. If your firm gets acquired, you're like, screw this, I'm going to start my own. And they can't stop you. I feel like it's human nature to get worked up and nervous and scared. And then I look back sometimes 5 years later, I'm like, why was I so nervous?
Sharp strategies, sweet success. Hello, everyone, and welcome. You're listening to Sharp Strategy, Sweet Success. I'm your host, Tiffany Swedensky, and today I have with me Jonathan Hawkins. I met Jonathan Hawkins, I think, about 2 years ago. He's the owner of law firm GC, Law Firm General Counsel, and Jonathan works with, and he'll have to explain this a little bit better than me because I work with mostly personal injury attorneys. My scope is pretty narrow, but he's a business attorney who works with other law firms, and he actually has a book, The Law Firm Life Cycle, which I have on my tablet and don't have in print, but it's available on Amazon. I think he has a book if you guys want to get from it. It's right behind him, actually, over his shoulder, so you can see it when you start talking. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for being on the show, and we'll turn it over to you to finish out your introduction.
Tiffany, thanks for having me. Yeah, I think it was maybe 2 years ago or so. But yeah, so like you said, owner of Law Firm GC. We're based in Atlanta, but we help folks all over the place. And I represent a lot of personal injury firms, so definitely have that in common. But the way I describe it is we help law firms from formation to dissolution and everything in between. So anything that might come up in the operation of a law firm, we probably can help the firm with it.
We discussed a couple topics we're going to get into, and one of those is private equity, which I definitely want to learn more about. But just because I'm curious, how did you get started in this particular area of practice?
Yeah, so this started about 15 years ago, the seed that became the practice I have today. I grew up as a business litigator, and I did a lot of business divorces of closely held businesses of various types. And then I did a law firm breakup, like I did, law firm business divorce, and I learned a ton in that. And I found out that, a lot of law firms often don't have written agreements. And if they do, they're not really built for the fight that is going to happen if it happens. And so as my journey progressed, I moved from the fights to drafting agreements to help avoid or minimize the fights. And along the way, I had to become an ethics expert because there's all these things you can and can't do as lawyers. And then over the years, I have just slowly filled in the space and done more and more stuff. So probably about, 5 years ago, I started doing more and more succession planning type work, transitioning of law firm owners, which has then moved me. You mentioned the private equity. That's sort of the new place that I've been playing lately. And again, anything from operating a firm. So maybe an employee issue, all the stuff. And also the way I tell my clients is, I am you because I'm running a firm and I'm encountering some of the same issues you are. So I can understand what you're going through. Maybe not everything, but most things.
Well, as a non-lawyer who's been around lawyers for a long time, it is still surprising to me, like how much independent expertise is developed within the legal field. It's also funny how often expertise is developed. You do a special project, you learn how to do it, you realize not many other people understand that in that special way, and so you just do more of it. And so that's how a lot of businesses get started. So that's really, really cool. So explain to me, like I'm 5 years old, what's going on with the whole private equity thing?
Okay, so where to begin? This is the way I sort of see how they came into the space. So, let's call it 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever. You've got the institutional money that started to lend money to law firms to get leads, to support their dockets, whatever. They would lend it as debt and they get an interest rate. They couldn't really participate in the upside. So then Arizona came along, they created this, they smashed everything and created the ABS structure where you could have non-lawyers own law firms. And for a while that was hot. Everybody was trying to go to Arizona to get some sort of special ABS status because then they thought that would be the way that they can go, conquer the legal space. But a lot of states have been pushing back on that. I don't know, a week or so ago, South Carolina came out with a new ethics opinion that says you cannot do business a South Carolina lawyer cannot do business with an ABS, and a South Carolina lawyer cannot own a piece of an ABS. As I've seen it, that sort of idea and approach is starting to die down a little bit. So private equity is coming in a different approach. And this is one, and I'll just call it the MSO approach. And this is one that has been used in dental and accounting and all these other professional service verticals for a long time. This is not a new approach, but it is it's hot. I'll say that for law. It is, everybody's looking at it. And so basically what that is they carve out all of the functions of a law firm except for the lawyers and the legal practice and put it in this other entity called an MSO. It's a managed services organization. And that does all the support and everything for the firm. And then you've got these service agreements with the law firm, and then the law firm pays MSO for that. So the MSO can be owned by anybody. You don't have to have a law license to own it. And so that's how private equity is getting in there. And so they're going to own the MSO and then start to roll up these firms, and they buy the assets and all the operational pieces and they put it in the MSO. So they'll have this sort of hub in the middle that is the services organization, and then all around are going to be the law firms. So that's how they're getting in.
What are the pros and cons of getting bought out by private equity?
That's a loaded question.
Well, okay. Well,
I can tell you. So if you are the owner or owners and you're towards the end and you're ready for an exit, this gives you the exit. So, I've done a lot of, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of succession planning over the years. And, historically for law firms, there's really only a few options. You could sell internally to people if you had people there. You could maybe find another firm that would sell externally, and there's a couple forms that could take, or you just shut it down. And now there's a new option on the table, and that's private equity. And it's for certain types of firms. It's not going to work for every firm, but for certain types of firms and with certain, I guess, if they're in the right place at the right time in terms of the owner, where they want to go and all these things, now they have a new option to just sell out, and they can get a nice check and walk away for the most part. Not completely, but for the most part.
If you're on your way out, you could be bought by private equity, and that's a new option to you. What qualifies you to get bought by private equity? Like, if that's what you want, what do you have to do, I guess?
So there's lots of different reasons why somebody might want to acquire a certain firm, and lots of reasons why they may not want to acquire your firm. And so where I have seen it personally and up close and in the trenches is personal injury right now. That's where a lot of folks are going. And even within personal injury, you have different types of firms. So for example, you have the high-end boutique trial lawyers that may handle a docket of 10 to 20 cases at any given time, and they try cases, big cases. That's not really going to be something that I don't think private equity is really going to want, at least not in the beginning, because the value is really tied to that trial lawyer that can go in there and just try a case and all of that. But on the other end of the spectrum in the PI, you have sort of the billboard, high volume, I call it almost the widget factory type practice, where you've just got a high volume of cases coming in, maybe lower dollar value, generally speaking, and it's more of an enterprise and a machine. And you might have an owner like John Morgan or somebody that's branded and everybody knows who that is, but John's not doing the cases. He's got a huge team of people doing the cases. So really it doesn't matter if John's in the business or not. And so a private equity person could say, we'll just buy John out. Not that this has happened, but this is how they're thinking. We'll keep him on the billboards, but we're going to own it in the background, and nothing's really going to change from a day-to-day operation. And so that's really more of what I think they're looking for. So if I'm a law firm owner out there, the ways that I would want to get ready, I tell a lot of owners that, I don't know if it's the irony or not, but the less a firm depends on you, the owner, the more valuable it is. And so what are ways you can work on your firm to get yourself removed from the day-to-day? So first thing, don't do the cases. Have somebody else do the cases. Don't do the operations. Don't do the marketing. You just go down the list. Now you orchestrate that and you're at the top and you fund it and all that, but you have other people and other groups within your organization that are doing those things. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Do you think it's wise for some law firms to hold out and resist private equity? I guess that's kind of my question. Or do you feel like this is kind of an inevitability?
Well, I think this is going to take some time. It's not going to end in 2 years. I think this is a process that's probably going to take 10 or more years, 15 maybe, to play out. If I am on the younger end of the spectrum, I've got a long ways to go. Why would I want to cut off my revenue stream? Is it going to be enough money to sustain me for the rest of my life versus somebody who's 68 and has sort of already done it all and maybe they don't want to do it anymore? So it's a good exit ramp. So a lot of it's age. Now, I know some younger people that just want to do something different and they want to get out. They're like, okay, I want to go try a new venture. So that might be a reason. Selling to private equity does not mean it's all sunshine and rainbows, because there are lots of strings that come with those sorts of deals. And also, if you have a team and an organization that you've built and you care about your people and you want to, all these things, maybe those are reasons why you wouldn't want to sell to certain groups, and not all private equity firms are the same. So lots of reasons, pro and con. It really depends on the personal situation, I think.
Private equity pretty much takes over marketing, operations, and what's left is like a small team, paralegal, maybe legal assistant, and a few attorneys who actually like run and process the cases as they would have before, just without the operational overhead. Does that sound about right?
Close. So all the people, usually all the people, paralegals, assistants, everybody except the lawyers are in the MSO. And so the MSO will rent or provide the paralegal services or the administrative services through the MSO, and the law firm will pay for that. It'd be like if you hired a contractor or some business that gives you paralegal support. You don't actually employ the paralegals, you're paying the vendor. Same concept. And so only the lawyers typically are left in the law firm.
Like if they don't like their paralegal or their legal assistant, or if the lawyer isn't properly supported by operations, like how is that handled?
That's a good question, and we're going to see how all this plays out.
Well, I mean, I definitely see the value of outsourcing certain things. And I was just having a conversation with a client of mine, a former client, I guess, and he was asking about like SEO. And, for me, like SEO is the industry that I'm watching, and I'm wondering like what's going to happen in the next few years, right? And, private equity has kind of come into that space as well. But also at the same time, you have this like dramatic shift in like search and AI and all this stuff. And so it's unclear if what SEO companies, at least to me, traditionally do is going to be massively beneficial. But that's a tangent. That was a tangent. And what I meant to say was like, SEO, website administration, the overhead to keep the people on board at a law firm to do those things is massive. It's so much cheaper to rent that out to a vendor, but like, you don't like your SEO vendor, you can fire them and hire a new SEO vendor. It's still a pain, but it's still a choice you get to make. Kind of sounds like you're saying though that attorneys may not get the choice.
Again, that's a great question. We'll see how that plays out. I mean, it's in, I would think, the MSO owner's best interest to make sure that they are providing quality help. If a paralegal or whoever is not doing a good job, they would want to know that and actually get somebody that's doing a good job. But you're right. I mean, how much influence could the law firm have over that person? And then you get into, this is where the ethics part comes through, is the opposite, where the non-lawyer MSO, the MSO owned by a non-lawyer is trying to dictate what legal approach, et cetera, that the lawyers take. And that is not allowed. They cannot do that. And so they're not supposed to do that. But we'll see, are they going to try to do that? And then how's that going to work?
What about case selection? Because that's something I go through with all of my clients. The difference between good lead, bad lead, if we should have gotten it, if we should have, rejected it. But if the marketing and intake is being handled completely by something else, like, are you just assigned cases to work?
Again, well, I'll say this, in some of my clients that are bigger firms that have high volume practice, that are all under one roof. I mean, that sort of happens already.
Oh, yeah.
Here's your case,
Yeah.
So I'm not sure it'll be that much different, but
I can definitely see it being like kind of a comforting thing, because marketing is so hard. Marketing is so competitive that I could easily see why, having that process outsourced, because not many lawyers that I talk to, because most of the lawyers I talk to own the law firms, but, I bet there are quite a few attorneys who would just be happier just practicing law or doing what they want to do. But like the owners that I know, I don't think they're working for the private equity firm. I think they're thinking about like how to leave and do something else. I mean, this has been a trend across like so many industries. And I know what you're talking, like my doctor's office was bought out by private equity and merged into this like massive statewide healthcare conglomerate. Is this like a sure thing? Like, have they figured out the legal industry in the same way they figured out like dental and some of these other healthcare?
I think it's too early to tell. They're certainly going to give it a go. Is it going to work long term? Who knows? It may work in certain parts of the law. I think certainly there are parts where it is just not going to work. But I do think, and this, circles back to some of what you do, Tiffany, and it's, if you don't want to go that route, there are things that smaller firms can do that the bigger firms cannot do in terms of marketing approaches and business development and lead generation. There are places that a smaller firm that wants to stay small can compete and win against these behemoths. So are you going to be able to compete on Google ads with the big boys? No. But are those leads even that good anymore? I don't know.
That's the other thing, is broadly looking at like case values and CPAs. It's not Google ads necessarily or digital marketing that gets you the best quality leads. Most of the leads that come through Facebook ads or other, very low to mid range at best, occasionally a real winner. But, for people who have been seriously injured, who are talking to multiple doctors, who are getting exposure to people who deal with serious injuries, or simply have family members who have been through like car accidents, most people ask for referrals first. And the bigger the injury, the more likely they're going to, seek a professional. What kind of leads are private equity going to attract? And is it just going to replace law firms that advertise more like Morgan and Morgan? Is it really going to impact the people who want to feel like they're at least like close to their lawyer and somebody who's paying special attention to them? Just generally the people who come through the referral channels.
Absolutely. And the other thing to keep in mind with private equity, generally speaking, there's a 4 to maybe 7-year turn. So they want results really within 5 years. And it's easy to throw money at billboards and TV and digital to get quicker hits, where the relationship development stuff just is a longer play. And so I'm not sure, if I'm a private equity fund, do I want to spend a lot of time investing in things that are going to take that might come to fruition after I'm already out? I don't know.
Well, I don't know all of the injuries or all of the industries that have been absorbed by private equity. But with law firms, some of the things that make law firm marketing unique is, one, the timeline. Dentistry, you could probably net some cleanings with some lead generation ads really quick, I imagine. I've never done it. And for healthcare, you could probably increase appointment setting and get paid that way. But as you know, with personal injury firms, like you get a case and it might be months to a few years until it's resolved. I'm not sure if AI is shortening those timelines yet. And it's definitely like a longer life cycle to make money. And I know, like talking to like young lawyers, like usually the start of a personal injury firm is working without a paycheck until you kind of settle that first big case, which is not a business model a lot of people are kind of eager to jump into.
Yeah, that's scary. If you don't have the war chest built, or at least a line of credit you can tap into, it takes a little while. Yeah.
You're helping a lot with these private equity transitions now, right?
Starting to, yes.
Could you talk a little bit about who are the law firms that you're helping, and I guess generally like what kind of benefit are you bringing them?
I can't disclose details, but I can say the ones I've been involved in, personal injury, and I'm on the seller side, not the private equity side. Those are typically, big firms. Think the big national, international type firms are on that side. I'm on the seller side. And again, the ones I've seen are personal injury. I hear talk about some others. I've had lead people calling me, asking me if I, can give them leads, private equity side. I've gotten calls from what I'd call traditional type firms that have the old general practice type firms that say they've been getting calls. And on some level, I think there are a lot of new funds that have popped up that have never been in the legal space, and they're just putting out lots of feelers, and they don't really know yet where to go and what they're going to try to do. But on the personal injury, it's ramping up more and more and more. I mean, everybody's heard of the Chad Dudley DeBosier deal down in Baton Rouge, and he's out there looking for more. So that's really hit. That's where everybody's talking about it. But there are other, as I'm looking at it, I would look at probably consumer-facing type practices with higher volumes would be some of the areas that I think they're going to be looking at. So maybe immigration, maybe consumer bankruptcy, maybe real estate or residential real estate, maybe family law, but that's sort of like PI too. There's a spectrum there. So we'll see how it plays out. And I think this is going to be 10 to 20 years before we really see. And it may not work. At the end of the day, it may not work.
So you said like 10 to 15 years, like we're going to see if this really works, if this really doesn't. And you're right. Like even I've started getting like weird emails that I assume are spam of some degree, but that are also talking about private equity acquiring marketing agencies in the legal space. And I can't imagine they're actually serious though. But, so they're looking for resources, they're absorbing it. It's honestly kind of scary. Like it makes me want to get kind of dystopian about it because like we're really, as a people heading in this direction, we're like everything is owned by these huge big companies and maybe that's just like the trend everywhere, but at the same time like I live in the real world. I drive into my home, my town where I live. I shop at the store that's owned by a woman that I know. Like I met her a few times. And I like that. As a consumer, I like that. And I can see myself also like as a consumer, I switched doctor's offices when my doctor's was bought by or absorbed by private equity. I don't know if that's exactly the same thing. So from a consumer standpoint, I'm not sure, what the market will decide here. Like if people will just buy the most visible option in the legal space, the low quality leads going to Google, looking for attorney near me, click the one with the most reviews and, you're off to the races. Or if there's still like a subset of the population who wants to meet somebody, shake their hand, and feel like they're dealing with a local business owner. And then like I think about some of the attorneys I know who are just like basically celebrities in their hometown. Like how are they going to be absorbed? Legal is one of those industries where personal identity and personal brand. I talk to attorneys about personal brand all the time. That's so important, yet it's so convoluted and complicated. But is it something that you fear for the industry or you fear private equity for this industry? Or do you think it's like just the next step in evolution or something?
I don't fear it. I think it will change things for sure. But the law is so fragmented. There's so many small shops everywhere, and you cannot lock lawyers down with non-competes. So if your firm gets acquired, you're like, screw this, I'm going to start my own. And they can't stop you. Where in other fields, you can lock people down. And it's a little bit tougher for them to just leave and start their own thing. I do think it's going to take a long time to really consolidate, and they're never going to be able to consolidate at all. There's just no way. So you're going to see some really big players. And you've sort of seen it with Morgan. I mean, you've seen it with, if you look back over the last 25 years of personal injury. When they started advertising, it was dominated by sort of these local markets. And then Morgan, again, I'm not a historian of this, but my impression is that Morgan was really the first that really started creating a bigger, more national platform. And others have started to go that way. That was sort of happening already anyway. This is just the next chapter in that. But even with Morgan and others doing this, you've seen so many new smaller firms pop up over the years. I mean, it's like there's more of them than there were before. I think there are always going to be opportunities for a lawyer that wants to start their own firm or have their own firm and not have to be tied to some bigger machine. And that's one of the beauties. It's not like other industries where you have huge CapEx costs. You got to buy this big equipment and big buildings, all these things. All you need to practice law really is a law license, an internet connection, and a computer. And you can go. You need clients and all those things too, but it's not that hard to get it going. So, and to make a decent living. I mean, you may not conquer the world, but you can make a decent living. So I'm not that worried about it.
Definitely a topic that's like all the rage, and I hear a bunch about it. And I feel very much the same way you do. Like, I feel like there will always be space for people who want to run their own business, to do something on their own. And yeah, just as a marketer, like not a lawyer, it's always very frustrating to me, like how difficult it is to market and how difficult it is to find just the right kind of case for an attorney. I mean, it just really doesn't sound like that's going to change. Like, none of the law firms I work with want the cases that Morgan and Morgan handle or that private equity is going to attract. I guess it just depends on the person, like if you want to go this route or if you want to go that route. Well, let me ask you this. Why does it seem to me that so many lawyers are worried about it? Like, why do I hear a lot about private equity?
I think because it's the new thing on the scene.
Okay.
And it's brand new. And I mean, everybody's talking about it everywhere, at least where I am. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody wants to know. I mean, even last week here in Atlanta, some friends of mine were getting together to lunch, and we're getting together to talk about private equity. Like, okay. So I joined them, and it's just all the rage. I think it will quiet down. I just think it is, burst on the scene. They're getting lots of emails and calls, but it will die down. And again, remember, private equity or any buyer, if I'm buying a business, let's just say a small business search buyer, they look at dozens or hundreds of small businesses and pass on so many of them. To make a deal work, it's got to be a very particular type of deal. So everybody's out there looking, but most of these firms and most of these, they're going to get passed on. They're not an ideal target. So, but nobody knows that yet. And it's the allure, it's the new thing. I just think that's part of it.
I suspected. Well, and I also am old enough to remember, and I've been in this industry long enough to remember self-driving cars. And some very serious conversations at mastermind groups are about how self-driving cars are going to kill the personal injury industry. And I felt the fear, at the time. Years later, I have a car with, automated driving features, but even Tesla doesn't put themselves forth as automated driving because that wasn't, I feel like it's safe to say now, that was an overblown fear. And so, when I've thought about private equity, I think of that. I think, like, is this like self-driving cars? Is this like something that a whole lot of people are worried about, but we're not quite there yet? It's more complicated than that. I don't know. And it kind of sounds like it is, but maybe actually more of a legitimate threat than Tesla was.
I don't know. I get the same sense about AI.
Oh.
It's a similar end of the world. Some people think it's the end of the world. It's the end of jobs. No one's going to have a job. And then there's other people that say, no, it's all hype. And we'll end up somewhere in between, but we'll probably end up with more jobs. I don't know. I feel like it's human nature to get worked up and nervous and scared. And I fall victim to it all the time. And then I look back sometimes 5 years later, I'm like, why was I so nervous? Why did it just... hell, COVID, we thought we were all going to die, right? And some people did, so I don't want to, whatever. But people wiping their groceries down.
Mm-hmm.
And then you look back and you're like, man, I think we overreacted a little bit.
I definitely remember a moment during COVID where, I'm trying to play it cool, definitely trying to play it cool around my husband and the kids. But I was listening to a news broadcast. It was very early. And a doctor was on a news show saying, like, it doesn't seem to affect kids that much. And I was like, oh, thank God. Like, at that point, a lot of my COVID fears went away, but it was a very scary time, and we've quickly forgotten that. But, well, Donovan, thank you so much for being on the show and talking private equity. I want to talk more about AI since you touched on it, but I'll spare my listeners because I did a lot of that in the last episode. But definitely also something I think is a little bit overhyped. But thanks so much for being on the show and talking with me. Is there anything that you wanted to go over that we didn't have a chance to talk about today?
No, there's so much we could talk about, but you'll have to get me back on later.
Yeah. Although to date, the longest episode I've done was with Charlie Mann, and it was almost 2 hours. And so I'm just going to let him win that race for a little while before, going over. But, well, thanks again. Where do you want people to look you up and learn more about you?
Sure. My website is lawfirmgc.com, and I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. Come find me there. It's Jonathan Hawkins, Law Firm General Counsel, I think is maybe my sort of, if you do that search, you'll find me. and send a connection request almost to the end of my connections, but shoot me one and I'll accept it. So,
Oh, okay. And your connection request for the month?
no, you max you out at 30,000 connections and then you can't connect anymore. You can only follow after that.
I had no idea. I evidently have not been LinkedIning hard enough because, okay, well, that's the number to beat, guys. Well, congratulations on that. Well, thanks so much again for being on the show, and we'll see everyone next time.
Thanks, Tiffany.